Ask the Podcast Coach for July 18th, 2015.
Let's get ready to podcast.
Oh, there it is. It is Saturday morning. Sunny outside, and we're here surrounded by walls and microphones on Ask the Podcast Coach. You can join us out at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting. And joining me, as always, I need a slogan. Fortified. We did this last week. Fortified with, now with more fiber. The one, the only, from the AverageGuy.tv, Jim Cullison. How's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning. I did get a round of disc golf in this morning, and then I had my granola when I came in. So, yes, indeed, I do have more fiber. And I hugged a few trees while it was out.
Excellent. Yes, and for those of us, you should explain what disc golf is, formerly known as?
Frisbee golf is what it used to be, and there's a whole subculture, and it's getting super popular these days. My oldest son is into it, and so he's kind of dragged me in, and about $15 a disc. They're like Frisbees, except they're flatter and they're about as heavy. They just fly a little bit farther, or you can throw them straighter, kind of things like that. But talk about an expensive hobby. I mean, it's not as expensive as golf because you don't pay anything to get on the courses. But with these discs being $15 or $10 to $15 to $20 each, you can get them on Amazon. Man, it can stack up. My son's got a caddy, and he's got like 20 discs in it. Are you kidding me? There's $150 worth of discs in there.
Absolutely. And then same thing, we're talking to hobbies. People always talk about, I'm trying to do podcasting for next to nothing. And I got my bike out because it was actually almost looked like summer for an hour here in Cleveland. And the chain's all rusty. And so I took it down to the bike shop, and I go, what's the average, like, just top to bottom tune-up go for these days? They're like $65. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and I was just like, all right, well, that'll, I didn't know, and didn't think it was going to be cheap, didn't think it was going to be quite that, but I'm like going, okay, I'll drop that to make sure my bike doesn't fall apart, and, and I go falling apart with it. And I was like, they're $65, and yet, some people are like, I don't know, $59 for a microphone.
Can't pay $5 for hosting.
Yeah.
I don't want to get my stats for $5.
Yeah, so we all have our hobbies, and they bring joy into our life. And hey, it is a live call-in show, and we'll talk about a fun little technology riffle today that I'm having here. But if you'd like to call in, that number is 347-850-8007. Again, 347-850-8007. We should say today's podcast apparently is brought to you by Boss Jock. I'm actually using my phone today to play the little bumpers and the music and such. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. I fired up my iPod today. iPod. What year is it? 2006?
Yeah.
It's just flat out dead. Like, not a thing on it. I can press and hold down the on-off button. It's weird. And I swear I charged it a couple days ago. I expected it to be low battery today. And usually after you plug it in for a little bit, you'll get a little, like, a plug-in symbol with the only thing I can think of is maybe this cable doesn't work and it's really not charging. I'll be talking about that at Podcast Movement, which is how to troubleshoot your podcast. And that's one of the things, is isolate stuff, but it's just weird. It's just dead. And I'm like, being that it's been plugged in for about 10 minutes now, I'm thinking either it's the cable or something.
Maybe battery's gone. How close is the nearest Apple store to you?
About 15 minutes.
No, so that's not too bad. So you can run that down there.
Yeah,
and just go, hey, geniuses.
Yeah, I'll be sitting there probably Sunday, because today I have a consulting appointment at 12:15, and then I have to run to potentially join a band. I'm like, oh, this is such a bad idea, right?
Is it audition, or are you just gonna chat with these guys?
My wife sent it to me, looking to form a blues rock band, and I'm like, all right. So I emailed the guy and sent him a video of me playing.
She really wants you back in a band, doesn't she?
She really wants me back. Always has. Because she loves to go out and dance. And so, and they're like, yeah, this would be cool. And I'm like, let's get together and make some noise. And
talk about things that ruin podcasts.
Yeah.
A band, right?
Well, it's one of those things that, on one hand, it's creative and it's fun. But when you think about how much money you make per gig, because you make maybe $50. The last band I was in, we actually got paid pretty decent. We'd get like $100 a gig. But you practice, once a week for a couple hours. So there's 8 to 10 hours a month. and then you got all your equipment. That's really what you get paid for. And in the end, here's your $50 for 10 hours work. You're like, wait a minute, how's that? $5 an hour?
Right.
Yeah. So it's, it'd be fun. I kind of miss it, but I'm getting old and cranky. So I don't want to play music I don't want to play, and I don't want to deal with buttheads that are drunk and high and that whole nine. I understand that if it's the bar, I expect someone to come up and go, "Do you guys know the Electric Slide?" But my last band I was in, the
Freebird,
yeah,
Freebird,
the singer would drink Jaeger like it was Kool-Aid, and my favorite was and this is a guy with like 2 or 3 DUIs. He would we would get done and we're like packing things up. So this is like wind down time, and he would get one for the road. And I was like, he just, if you've ever been around alcoholics, they're fun because they will tell you 57 reasons how they know how to handle their liquor and how they know how to handle the police. And I was married to one for a while. And I always said, you're going to get a DUI eventually. And 2 years after we got divorced, she had the golden yellow plate saying, "Look at me, I'm an alcoholic."
Ouch.
Yeah. So that's always fun. But anywho, so yeah, again, 347-850-8007. We are here every Saturday live at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. And I did get this note from the School of Podcasting Facebook group. And it says, so I get this email yesterday from the Society of Canadian Composers about the version of my podcast that I put on Spreaker. Funny thing is, I don't include any music on the Spreaker version. And here's what it says: to whom it may concern, I'm contacting you on behalf of the Society of Composers, Authors, and Music Publishers of Canada, better known as SOCAN. We license access to virtually the world's repertoire of copyrighted protected music for public performance and communication in Canada. It seems that your podcast is available in Canada via Spreaker, but Spreaker does not cover performance and communication licenses. We need to make sure your business acts in accordance with the Copyright Board of Canada's approved, blah, blah, blah. I've also taken a brief look at your official website. Please confirm you have a SOCAN 22F license. Sounds very appropriate. I've attached a copy of the tariff for your information. Can you please tell me who is responsible for remitting and reporting to copyrighted collectives within your company? Blah, 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 blah. And so the interesting thing is, this is probably something they're sending out to all podcasters. And like he said, he has no music on his podcast. So they're probably just hitting everybody on Spreaker. So I need to get this over to, Rob Greenlee to let him know that the Spreaker people are getting fished. Yeah, I agree with Jeff says in the chat room that it sounds like a phishing thing. And I know I said last week I would have an Audio-Technica BP40. Words cannot express my disdain for both UPS and FedEx because the lady at Audio-Technica read me back my address, and for whatever reason, they lost the suite number. And so what I hate about this is if they had simply, like, there's a big sign when you walk into my building, like where to go to the office, and it said it said School of Podcasting, and I think it had my name on it too, but it didn't have my suite number. All they had to do was ask at the office, or I don't know, look at the big giant board when you walk in that says School of Podcasting, lower level 41, and they didn't deliver it. So I'm like, I called him. I go, well, can I pick it up on Saturday? And the person on the phone had no clue what I was talking about. They're like, no, we don't deliver on Saturday. I go, I understand that. Is it going to be at a location where I can come pick it up? I'll deliver it to me. And I was like, never mind. I'll just drop it off on Monday, and I'm going to put a sign that, hey, if I'm not here, which I'm not, throw it in the office. And those guys are always really nice. They'll actually, what's cool about this building, they'll drop it off the office, and the office will actually bring it down because they have a key and put it in my office for me. But no, I do not have it. I'm kind of bummed. That was going to be part of Monday's show for the School of Podcasting. And now I'm like, all right, what are we talking about? So that's always fun.
Speaking of gear in Amazon, did you partake in Prime Day, which was the 15th, which turned out to be a little underwhelming, don't you think? I think most people kind of thought, there were some deals out there. Daniel was nice enough to go hunt them down. He must have stayed up very late at night to get all the deals that were out there, and then he posted them and sent them in the newsletter. But I don't know, Dave. I took a peek. There wasn't. They were touting this thing as the greatest thing since Black Friday and blah blah blah, and then kind of nothing.
Yeah, I wanted to get. I have this little gizmo. It's one of those things you plug in to charge your phone. And this one's fine, but they make these like super jumbo deluxe ones now. I'm like, that would be cool. That way, if I need to charge my phone and the iPad, go into Podcast Movement. And they had one for like $17, normally like 38 something. It was like, 72% off. And I'm like, cool, go to it. Oh, it's on the wait list. It's already been, like, they set aside X amount of product to be sold at that price, which I understand in some cases that may be below cost or whatever. But, and then I went looking, I'm like, so I'm starting to like almost buy things just because I'm like, well, I can always use, a new charger cable, and I could always, and finally I just went, what, I'm going to potentially buy things and none of this I need. And so I just bailed. And then it was weird because they had it on, like, it was only for a certain time. So I would see another deal and it's like, oh, this will be happening, somewhere in the future. So you have to sit there all day. And I was like, all right, well, this is not Black Friday. And yeah, I agree with Chris in the chat room. Prime Day was basically lame day. I was tempted to get an Echo because I've heard, I know a couple of people, you included, that have one, and everybody's saying they're really, really cool. But
they did have a sale on those. They were down. They were $50 off at one point at $129. I don't know how many they sold, but they sold out really fast whenever they put out there. And then, so that became available. Yeah, I don't know. I do know right now, though, the 2005, the AT 2005 has jumped up to $80, and so that is now $60 right now for the 2100. So if you're, we talk about this from time to time, that price fluctuation. If you're buying one or the other, make sure you're absolutely checking both. So that's the, because they do fluctuate in price. I had just picked up three more 2005s for work. So we actually bought three. I had one shipped to Atlanta because they needed one, and then I bought two more while I was at it and had those shipped to me. I'm actually going to replace it in the studio. I like the black look with the black, with the black arm, since they're basically the same microphone. So I'm going to swap that out in the studio and go all black in that. Push that other one downstream out to guests and such. But yeah, it's one of those things. Make sure you're checking on Amazon before you purchase.
And apparently in the chat room we have a number of people that have an Echo, and all are giving thumbs up.
Gigantic wife acceptance factor. It is huge. We talk about that a lot on my tech show because it's all guys, right? And so we talk about when you buy technology and you get this wife acceptance factor, and most things don't get it, right? We jam technology. It's like most of our wives don't really get podcasting. Some do, but then whatever. And so we bring home new technology, and then we're like, hey, and they're like, we're never going to use this ever. I don't care how often you tell me this is cool. The Echo has amazing. I mean, it is my wife enjoys that Echo. I mean, she uses it more than I do. And so that's got really good acceptance factor. Dave, it looks like we have a caller.
We do, and it's interesting because the phone number is interesting. So this could be fun. We'll see.
Could be a Baba Booey.
Yes, ending in 1111. Let me click the button. Ending in 1111. You're on with Dave and Jim. What's your name and what's your question? Okay, let's make sure the phone's working. I'm going to put you back on mute because we do have another call. We did some tests this morning, and we found out, ending in 6251, you're on with Dave and Jim. What's your name and what's your question? This is going to stink if we have to go through this every week.
Yeah, because there's no good way to test it, right? Unless I test it right after we go live.
Yeah.
Type deal.
Yeah, because it's all I did last week was I went in and kind of re-selected the input, which in this case is just USB, and it shows that everything is working and I have lights blinking. And I think last week I had to disconnect and reconnect from Blog Talk, which really, really stinks.
That's very frustrating.
I'll have to tell the folks at Blog Talk. I'm like, because it's not, I mean, if I click a button here, let me go over to my Blog Talk Radio suite. I can play the, maybe it's not Blog Talk Radio. Right?
Maybe it's Dave.
Maybe it's Dave. Although I was playing stuff earlier.
I hear if you take your hand and smack the side of the monitor really hard,
yes,
that it actually.
No, we heard it dial.
Yeah, we did, but then we didn't hear it, right? I mean, we didn't hear it come in.
Yeah, because on
I wonder
All right.
if after some point in time it's losing with the no activity, if it's dropping it or something along those lines. Oop, I heard a little click there.
Yeah, I'm unplugging and plugging things back in.
Mhm. Sometimes that reactivates the sound channel, so to speak, when you do
Yeah,
that.
very odd. Oh, the joys of live stuff. Let me go back now and double check.
This just is screaming for a better solution, one of those kinds of things. We were talking with Rob a little bit about, or I was listening to Rob talk a little bit about on Spreaker Live, Spreaker may look for some kind of, or they are thinking about possibly some kind of live solution, because this is more and more people are wanting to do these kinds of things, and
Yeah.
it's just gets harder and harder and harder.
So here I'm gonna test the channel. Yeah, so it's not the cable.
Okay,
Cable's
so that's
fine.
good. That's good.
So I plug this into the headphone out of the Mac. And that is what, let me double check on that. If I go here to sound, because again, we're having a hard time hearing them. I'll click on headphones. And
All right, so next week, start your show 10 minutes early or 15 minutes early on Block Talk Radio, and then we can call in and
yeah,
test
that's
it.
true. Yeah, the other thing I'm noticing.
Mike Dell had said I'd been switching channels on them from left to right. That's cool. Which am I in now? Am I in both channels?
Yeah, it's really weird because it's not showing. Ah, crap.
Shoot.
Yeah, if I do this, it does nothing.
Oh, good. I'm in both.
Yeah, very weird.
Well, maybe we can, if you're trying to call in, we're having some temporary problems with that, drop your question in the chat room, and we will grab it from there.
It stinks. Let me go back here and put.
Quick record that question.
Yeah.
Send it to, what's your email address?
I'll doggone it. And we'll go back to, now we're dropping calls. We'll go back to 1111.
We're crashing. We're crashing.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing there.
1111. No, nobody there. That's odd.
And I am getting nothing from my Mac. No kind of sound.
What's a good email address for them to record those questions and send them to you?
Schoolofpodcasting@gmail.com is what I have up in the
Schoolofpodcasting@gmail.com. Just quick record those real fast and send us to it, and we'll play them right here.
Yeah, and then I have no idea. The problem is if I play these, actually I can play them. Let me fire up my Gmail over here, or you could go over to schoolofpodcasting.com/speakpipe. And
how does those SpeakPipe? So somebody clicks on SpeakPipe, they talk. Where do they go? What do they do? How does that work? You get an email at the end, or
I get an email and a link to say, so and so has left you a message. Click here to, listen to it. And what I really wish they would do is put some sort of automatic gain control. I got this phenomenal testimonial that's distorted beyond belief, because it kind of gives you this little, like here I actually got, we'll see if here again, this is on the Mac. This will be a good test to see. Yeah, it's
Oliver says you're having a bad weekend. We were talking about this early, right? Schoolofpodcasting.com is having some issues too because you're trying to move it over, right?
Yeah. So here's a message from SpeakPipe.
Hello, David, and hello, Jim. This is Brian from Australia, and my question to you guys is, I'm curious, and I need to know what types and how many cables do I need to set up the Q802 USB Behringer mixer, and to be able to record with the Zoom H5 for general podcasting and also for podcast interviews using Skype or tools such as that. Can you give us some ideas there? Because just putting it all together and knowing the cables, what I really need to order, it'd be very helpful. So thanks again, Dave and Jim.
See, that sounded awesome.
Then that did sound good. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the way to do it, is just to have them call in on SpeakPipe from here on out.
In the
And it's a
future.
lot easier that way.
That's true.
So he's looking at the Q802, which is a USB mixer. It's got 2 XLRs.
And he's talking about
it's 6
Sending it out
channels.
to a portable recorder.
Right.
And what I usually tell people is either A, get this is an RCA to 1/8 inch, I believe, or 0.35 millimeter cable, and this can go right into the line out and so whatever you hear in the mixer is going to go into your recorder. Or if you want, you can get little adapters like these that make it 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch, and that's basically how I'm playing my phone today. Is I basically plug that. Now here I'm putting things into the mixer. You can also use it to go out of the mixer. And then, it's weird because I'm sitting here with the Behringer 1832 USB. I don't have a plugged in USB. I've never plugged in USB. I should, just for giggles, just to see what it's like. But that would be for me, because the big question there was, how do I plug it into a recorder? And I would just say one of these, a little, 1/8 inch to go to the line in of your recorder, and then either use the line out or the main out with a 1/4 inch option. So
Yep, that's the easiest way. There's
Yeah.
other ways, but that's the easiest way. Then you'd monitor that through the phone jack. So you would plug that in a set of headphones, and you would hear your whole mix that's going into the recorder. You do get some advanced control. One of the things, you could come out of the mains too. You could use that same contraption, but just get 1/4 inch to the RCA adapters that come with it, and then you could come out of your main jacks as well, because you're not really doing anything with main at that point. And then the main, you're getting the full control that you would get on the mains, right? And you're not running any effects or anything with this, so it doesn't really matter. But then your main knob, you can also control the volume, the amount of volume that's going to the recorder using your main. So that's not a bad way to. That's what I actually do with. I've got the Mackie. I get that Mackie 12 channel, the FX12, and that's what I use. I come out of my mains as opposed to coming out of the line out. Just to. I don't think. Maybe for a pure sound guy that would make a difference, but for me, I just prefer to control it with the main, coming main out.
Yep, that's me too. I've had, I don't know if it's still this way, but in the past I've had people with USB mixers, and they're going into Audacity, and it wasn't giving them enough signal out. Like the USB out was kind of a low level, and they ended up just going analog, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah. Jeff had a question in chat. He said he tried to call. I recorded an interview in a small apartment with a loud window air conditioner. I used 2 ATR 2005s into a Zoom H5 with a 98 hertz low cut. It really helped the audio. How can I go on the low cut filter without messing up the voices? Well, this is one of those kinds of things that if you're in an airport, you're not going to cut out the airport sound, right? If you're at a concert, you're not going to cut out the audience noise. There are some tricks you can do, but every effect you put in place to cut out the background noise is going to cover frequencies, in most cases, that are covered by the voice. So you're not going to do it. You can't effectively remove that. If you so some people say, well, put a gate. Well, you're still going to hear that air conditioner in the background
When you talk, yeah.
When you're talking, right? So you can overcome it, and there's tricks you can do to kind of make it better. That's what you're trying to do there. There's some effects you can do to make it better, but the best thing is don't be in the room with the air conditioner. I mean,
That's it. Turn it off, baby. I remember
that. Yeah,
artists sweat for their art.
I know. Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. That's just the way it is. I hate to be that way, but don't compensate for background noise with effects. You're just always going to have a little bit of, in some cases a lot, in some cases a little bit. You're going to affect your vocals in almost any changes you make, unless you're a wizard, right? And there are those out there that are wizards. So I'm not one of them, but it's just the way that goes.
I doubt this will work, but ending in 1206, you're on with Dave and Jim. What's your name and what's your question? That's what I thought.
Yeah, still nothing yet.
And if I remember right, I've tested this. We're not getting any audio. So it's somehow. Let me try.
Jeff says he's a man with health issues and no other option is available. Yeah, I get that. I'm not trying to be insensitive to that at all. Don't take it that way. I get it. There are little tweaks you can do. You'll have to, because every recording's different, you'll have to mess with the effects a little bit to see what does it. There are some different ways of changing it. Dave, I'm not an audio engineer, and I don't think you are either. And so there's actually, in the Google Plus group, there's a guy, I want to think his name is Paul.
Yeah.
That's been in the podcasting group. He is an audio crazy guy.
Man.
So that might be a great question.
Deep in the pool, yes.
That might be a great question for him, as far as, because that goes really deep when we talk about all the different effects you could use to help cut that out. Just remember, any one you apply is also going to apply to the audio of the people on it.
I'm going to try another little troubleshooting thing. I'm going to try to play. I played something in from SpeakPipe, so it's not the Mac. It's Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah, bummer.
Think about it. So here, just to give you an example, this came in from John. I believe his last name is just pronounced Sarpelis. But here's an example of, I think, not great audio from. Yeah.
Hi, Dave. This is John Sarpelis, host of the Commonwealthy podcast. We train those who understand the benefits of limited government how to win a local election. But there wouldn't be a Commonwealthy podcast if it wasn't for you and the School of Podcasting. I spent about 6 months looking around at different websites.
So you get the idea.
Yeah.
Very nice of him, by the way, John. But it was, I wish there was like some sort of auto gain, because anytime I do a SpeakPipe for somebody, I always see it. They have these little green lights that do that, and that's kind of how I know. But there's no like peak light, and so I usually kind of see that and then just back off, and then it is what it is. It's still better than if you called into the voicemail line. Those always sound like caca when you do that, but it's still better than nothing. And you can actually get a SpeakPipe account for free. I think the limit is you can only leave a message for 90 seconds under the free account, something of that nature. But
well, there are some tricks, when we think about the frequencies, and an air conditioner would generally come in at a very low frequency. And so if you can drop a lot of that low frequency out, now you're going to lose a lot of the bass that you're getting from from the audio. But sometimes you can kind of isolate that frequency and pulls it. What you've pulled too much when it starts sounding like you're underwater. That's the piece that it gets. Yeah. The other recommendation just there in chat, audiophonic would be a good way. I mean, they've got a lot of wizardry going on inside of what they're doing when they're cleaning some stuff up. So that might be worth a try too.
Yeah, I need to. This is one of those things that bugs you, and you kind of like. Here, I'm going to end my own call on Blog Talk Radio. I'm going to call back in.
Okay. While you're doing that, let me read a question out of the chat room. So David says, I have 3 hosts, all remote. For post-production, is it better to have them record locally to their own machines and send me it via Google Drive for post-work, or pipe it all into one track via my mixer here? Well, you're not going to pipe it into the mixer like you would think. It's going to come in via USB. You're going to bring that in all remote. Whatever your mixer's hearing, then you're going to record it, and it's going to be single track. When we think about your best possible audio is where that audio that's closest to your guest. So if you want best, yes, record them, have them all record locally, do a clap in the beginning or a snap or whatever it takes to get, do a countdown, whatever it takes so you can sync those files up. But that double ender, triple ender, whatever you want to call it, your best chance of the best possible audio from them is doing a double or triple ender, whatever in that case. If you're going to bring them all in, you're going to sound great, but they're going to be degraded because they're coming across Skype or a Google Hangout or one of those. Dave, one of the things I've discovered, speaking of Google Hangouts, one of the things I've discovered recently is when you are recording a Google Hangout, it takes a different protocol, and that protocol does not have as good of audio quality. It's compressed. It's heavily compressed when you're recording the Hangout. As soon as you kick off the recording, all of a sudden the audio becomes magical. It's crazy. You switch protocols, and it's clear. It's like Skype. It's crystal clear. And so I'm kind of thinking these days, I've been recommending Skype for anybody who wants to do audio only for the most part, in a non-complicated setup. use Skype. It's just got the best audio quality, bringing everybody in. That's what I've been recording when I'm doing my podcast consulting work. I use Skype to record the audio for everybody when I bring them in. But Google Hangouts in a non-recording, where you're not broadcasting it, is getting, I don't know if it's just as good or whatever, but it sure sounds really good. And so I'm going to kind of test around with Google Hangouts in video mode without recording, and then do some recording. I do a broadcast server kind of concept and do some recording that way to make it work. So Google is continuing to push the quality of a Hangouts, but let's see. No, David, I think the answer to your question is if you can do a mix. I mean, if you can do a double ender, that's going to give you the best quality.
Yeah. I'm going to hit a button here because we have some people keep calling.
Okay, let's try.
It's just not going to work because I'm hitting a play button. I mean, I'll go ahead and do this, but let me unmute this. Ending in 4910, you're on with Dave and Jim. What's your name and what's your question? Because what's interesting is I disconnected the call from Blog Talk Radio, and when I said, okay, call back in, it says you're busy. And it shows that I'm still in the call, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I've refreshed my screen. Yeah, they dropped the call. So again, if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/contact, there's a speak pipe there.
Yeah, that sounded good. And this is working in chat too. David follows up and says, outside of a good mic, adequate mixer, and headphones, what would the next piece of equipment you would buy to improve the all-out sound quality of your podcast? So outside of a mixer, headphones, microphone, what else do you get, Dave? What's another piece of equipment you recommend once you've got all of those? The
fun thing about equipment is there is no one size fits all. Because I could say I really love my DBX 286, and I think you'd have to get an S. I have a 286A. It's the mic
SX version too, right?
Yeah, it's a mic preamp. It's got a little bass boost. It's got a little treble boost. It's a noise gate. So I love it, and that's why I'm able to kind of move around here, and the volume doesn't change a whole lot because it's compressing it. So I love that. But to say get that, well, what if I have multiple co-hosts? Well, now you got the thing that's kind of bad about this is it's one channel, one mic, and it wouldn't make much sense to run a gate through the whole mixer because that's not going to work. But yeah, I would say a compressor limiter gate, but I would also ask my audience, how's the quality of my audio would be one. And number two, what kind of feedback are you getting? Do you have an engaged audience? Because I hear so many people that want to blame the lack of engagement on poor audio quality. And I'm like, in some cases, maybe it's not the sound quality, it's the content. I'm actually doing a thing for the School of Podcasting. We mentioned this last week. And what are the always questions that people always ask? And the question is always, how many downloads should I have? And that is another question that's like, okay. And I came up with I said, take the value you provide in your episodes and multiply that by the effort you put forth to promote it. And that's how many downloads you should have. Because if you could have the best, like, oh my gosh, life-changing content, but if you don't tell anybody about it, that's going to grow really kind of slow. Or if you have, content, but you promote the crap out of it, well, that's not going to grow as fast either. And so now I can say you should have somewhere between 10, which is my test from last week from the worst podcast ever, somewhere between 10. And then Rob says that 50% of podcasters have below 200 episodes and 50% have over 200 episodes. So I looked at our stuff. This is why I don't quit this show and I never do it, is the Jillian Michaels Fancast is averaging 2,000 downloads an episode. And it's not Jillian Michaels. It's me talking about Jillian Michaels. And on occasion that will bring in a nice little affiliate check. Building a Better Dave is another podcast that I've pretty much abandoned, but I do every now and then. Gets about 300 downloads. The Marketing Musician, which used to back in the day get like 2,000 downloads, because I've basically just abandoned it, gets about 600 downloads an episode. Weekly Web Tools gets about 325. Feeding My Faith, which is another one that's on and off, gets about 150. The Worst Podcast Ever gets about 10 per episode. The School of Podcasting is all over the place. That's the one I was looking at. I mean, it's anywhere from 1,500 to like almost 3,000. It kind of depends on what the topic is. So I just picked it in the middle and said 1,600. And this show, I'm surprised, doesn't get more downloads. This one gets about 300. But on the other hand, I don't talk about it as much. I do, and I always tweet it and promote it, but I don't spend a lot of time promoting the show. And I went, okay, if I'm going to follow my own advice, I don't spend enough time promoting this. So maybe I should be playing clips of this in the School of Podcasting to bring some of that audience over. I'm not really sure, but
I think some people don't know they can listen to it. I mean, they think it's a Saturday morning call-in, like it's live. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And they might think, and sometimes it just takes time to grow. Just because you have an established audience doesn't mean you start a new show. We have Home Gadget Geeks does 2,000, let's say. We're probably at that between all of our channels. And then we started a new one called Cyber Frontiers, incredibly geeky, big data, cybersecurity type stuff. It's ranging in the 300 to 500, right? And we've been going on for a year. We have 20. We just recorded our 23rd episode, but we've been going for a year, so you can kind of, a little more than that. You can kind of tell we don't get them. We don't do it as often as actually 2 years. We don't get them in as often as we should, about one a month. But just because, I thought, wow, man, I'll pick up maybe a quarter. Well, I guess I'm pretty close to a quarter of that, but you'd think you'd get more, right? You think that at least they'd try it out. And it did make new and noteworthy, and I got a big bump on that. Those went from maybe on the video. What's been surprising about this is the video small to this show does incredibly well. And it hit new and noteworthy, and it went from 100 to 2,000. 3,000 was the max that it hit. Now it's gone back down to about 200. So, it's one of those kinds of things where I got my new and noteworthy bump on it, which, by the way, it wasn't new. It was noteworthy, right? And I know we keep gets a dead horse. We keep kicking that thing to death.
Yeah, somebody, I forget who it was, sent me another podcast, like Game of Thrones or something like that, that was an old podcast, and they're back in new and noteworthy, and it's longer than 8 weeks. So
yeah, Craig says this show is very niche-y, and it is. It is. Yeah. It's a call-in show, and it's like this. We're having problems with Blog Talk Radio and getting the calls in. You guys are, Yeah,
I was listening to last week's show, or the 11th show, whereas when this problem really started happening, and I try to edit out the part where we're going, is the caller there? And I'm like, man, that's
15 minutes worth of material you cut out, right?
Yeah, I was like, that was not engaging content. But the thing I wanted to point out there is, here you see downloads are all over the place, and so is equipment. To me, I would say, I know somebody in the chat room said room treatment, and there are those podcasts that I listen to where, if I were to shut this off, so I have no gate, and I'll turn on my microphone, and there's just a ton of room noise, and it just sounds like, and I'm like, and it's worse than that. It's just, it just sounds like they're in a, they're just. And
yeah, we have that problem. We have a room in Singapore that when I do my podcast out of Singapore, and it's so hard. The walls are so hard, and I can't get the mic close enough to them. And this is the other thing. I get guests all the time. I'm looking around for a microphone. At work, I've got 3 microphones on my desk, and I don't have any here. But at the guest, so we'll get them on, and I'm like, they'll first join the call, and they sound like you just sounded, really echoey and far away. And I'm like, where's the microphone? And like, oh, just a second. And they got to reach. And I'm like, what are you doing? I don't say this. But I'm like, what are you doing putting that? Well, I didn't want it too close. Too close. I'm like, put it right in front of you. And they'll set it down like this, like out here. And I'm like, no, in front of you. And and I literally have to say, I want it as close to you as we can possibly get it, because I'll get the best sound from you that way. But oftentimes guests are intimidated by the microphone. Just by itself intimidates them, and so they want to they think, oh, I'm going to sound too loud. No, it'll adjust. You'll sound fine. Get that thing. If you'd, I almost want to have them just hold it, while they're there. So
go read our take on it, man. Just hold that baby.
I know. You're like, just get that up. So, but I do agree. The sound treatments in the room, they can make a big difference. I'm in a very soft room. I mean, I have a lot of softness around me, even though behind me it's not. Everything in front of me is. And that just keeps the echoing down. I also get very close to the microphone, which you do too, right? That. It's about mic technique. If you want somebody asked how do I get that Joe Rogan? Is it Rogan? Is that how he pronounces his name?
I think so. Yeah.
How do I get Joe Rogan quality? Right. Joe Rogan spends thousands of dollars, thousands, on his equipment and his producers, and he pays people to make it happen that way. That's how he does it, right? So are you going to do that? Probably not. Just to be honest, if you're 99% of the podcasters, you struggle to spend $5 on web hosting. You're not going to get it. So don't try. Don't set that as a standard, because you're not going to make it there. If you want to get there, you have to spend a bunch of money to get it there. I mean, these guys have great equipment, and they have pros running the sound.
Yeah, we're talking about the 286. So this is me without the 286, and so I can't in my headphones, but I can hear the fan of the computer on the floor, and if I move things around on the desk, you're going to pick up everything. But now if I turn it on, number one, I've got that cool, a little bit of a thing there, and if it's still going to pick that up. But I can definitely do this, where if this was off and I move away from the mic, it's really, and I'm talking here, but if I turn this on, now I can kind of move around and it keeps it up. So that's one of my,
What is that piece of equipment?
This is the DBX 286. It would be an S, I think, these days. I've got a link over, of course, at bestpodcastinggear.com if you look at the compressors and gates.
$180, something like that.
Yeah. So it's that's one of those, if the house is on fire, what equipment do I grab? That's I'm going to try to bounce that one on my head.
No, just get out of the building. We want you. don't go after sound equipment. We want you out of the building.
And you're talking about the Joe Rogans of the world and things like that. Did you hear do you listen to Startup at all?
No.
Okay, nope. Startup is the whole Alex Bloomberg, Gimlet Media, things like that. Number one, Gimlet Media is now you can they kind of did Patreon without Patreon. And here's the interesting thing about this. They have a thing now, because they explain how they're making $2 million this year in advertising, and they're spending $2 million on 3 shows, on Startup, Reply All, and the Mystery Show. And the Mystery Show, I've listened to 2, and that, in my opinion, I am not their target audience. Man, is that like, wow, there's 30 minutes of my life I can't get back. They have 22 employees. I think, no, 19. Ira Glass has 22 employees. So I'm like, what are these guys doing? I mean, they've got, but on the other hand, they're flying all over the place to interview people and things like that. But I was like, holy cow. But what's interesting is making $2 million. But if you want, you can become a member of Gimlet Media. And I love this. For $5 a month, you'll get to preview the other shows they're thinking about putting out. And I'm like, and they made it really spin, like you'll get to hear it before anybody else does, and blah, blah, blah. And some of these shows change before they actually make it live. And I'm like, so wait a minute. I pay you $5 a month and I become your sounding board.
Beta tester.
Yeah, I'm a beta. I'm like, wow, what a great. He's paying. He's getting paid to have a focus group. I'm like, that's a great move there. And if you pay a year in advance, I think you get a T-shirt. But I was just like, 19 employees for 2 shows. I'm like, or 3 shows. I was like, but on the other hand, I didn't think I was going to like this season of Startup, because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about this dating site called Dating Ring. And so I just was like, 19 employees. Holy cow. But so if you're trying to
they got money. They got money. Dumas had money. I mean, you're going to have to sink some in, and then spend a ton of time. The chat room's talking about this now. There's a lot of great videos out there by pros that are, and you gotta dig down and either learn it yourself or pay somebody to do it to get it done. You can do it. It's going to take an investment of time and money, I think, in this case. I was having a conversation this week with another podcaster, and they were kind of saying, boy, I really wish the podcasting, we like these 2100s, but I really wish the podcasting community would step up a level and go with more like what you have, or a Heil PR40 in general. Spend a little bit more money. So there are those people who are feeling like, boy, we could spend a little more cash and get a little bit better quality, and that might help the podcasting community out in general. So
yeah, I think it's one of those, as more and more people get on board, and more of these bigger companies are starting to come in. I don't know that they're spending thousands of dollars, but they're definitely using pro equipment. And, because you can spend literally thousands of dollars on a microphone, So when you spend 300, it's like, you know, and it's, again, we were talking earlier, you know, I'll spend $65 to tune up my bike, and I'll spend, you know, another 30 on a speedometer, and you know, all of a sudden it's easy to blow $300-400.
I spent $5 on coffee this morning.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you're kind of like,
Yeah. And
so, yeah.
I looked it up, an Xbox. Where was that? That's part of Monday's show. An Xbox Live is, I think, $342. And that's without a game. That's just the Xbox and a 500 gig hard drive. And so I was looking at it, because you can get, you know, a microphone, a stand, and a pop filter for $91. A mixer, if you need it, is $60. Libsyn is $20. We would say HostGator is $8. Artwork is $60. And $24 if you want an intro from Music Radio Creative. And again, you could make that with sounds from Audio Jungle and pay some guy on Fiverr to do that and save $10. But I didn't realize Music Radio Creative, $24 is a pretty big steal for them to make a jingle. But it's interesting, because it is hard because we all have, you know, this whole, you know, you got to feed your kids, stupid kids eating.
I know.
You know, it's like,
If I could go back, no, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it. The yeah, you know, it's deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and the investment you're going to make to get it done. And I think, you know, this is the question you've asked a bunch. And when we think about, we sometimes can dig so hard into the hardware that we forget about, we still got to have great content on the backside.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it just because you have great sounding audio doesn't mean people are just going to be like, whoa, this is the best thing I've ever heard because it sounds great. If you don't have great cadence, if you haven't worked on your speaking, if you don't have a great intro, if you don't, right, all those things kind of matter in the experience of who your audience is. And so you got to work on all those things. You know, it's one of those, and then you have to be lucky to get, if you're getting, you know, depending, to get picked up somewhere or to get the reach. I think, Dave, the reason why the number is 200, right? That's the magic number, is because that's the effect, that's the reach most of us have naturally, right? Family members, friends, social circles, Facebook, Twitter, right? I think all of us trying, if we create anything, I think we naturally have that circle of about 200 that we're going to get. Anybody who starts a podcast that it's decent in any way is probably going to get to the 200, 300, or 400 category. That's pretty easy to do. Getting beyond that is like, how good are you at marketing, right? Or how good is your show at somebody picking it up for the first time and going, wow, I really have to listen to this. And then how big is your niche?
Right, and how easy is it to share? And that's what I was looking at my list of, you know, Ask the Podcast Coach, Building a Better Dave, Marketing Musician. These are shows I put out maybe once every 2 or 3 months, you know, Feeding My Faith. And I thought, you know, if I didn't do any of those, if I just did School of Podcasting and Ask the Podcast Coach, you know, how much better would those shows be? How much more time would I have to promote? You know, and that's where we were talking, I think in the Facebook group about, Joe Thomas, I think is his name. It's driving me nuts. He took my Podcasting in 6 Weeks course, and he wanted to launch 2 podcasts. And I'm like, man, I'd really start with one. And he tried to, and he said, what I ended up doing was putting out 2 mediocre shows. He goes, I should have listened to Dave. And I'm like, nah, man, you gave it a shot, you know. But it is one of those things where I think a big part of, I'd like to look at, you know, some of the guys in the top 100 of iTunes and see like what their Twitter looks like, what their Facebook looks like, and see what they're doing in terms of promotion, because I think sometimes that's the piece that misses. It's not enough to make good content. That is definitely step one, but then you got to go out and promote it.
It's the minimum, right?
Yeah.
And then a lot of the big podcasts now already had a runway.
Yeah.
When they started, right? And so they were on TV. They were famous before. I mean, even Ira Glass had NPR behind them. Thousands of people listen to NPR on the radio.
Yep.
And so you have this. When I started my podcast, when I started Home Gadget Geeks, which was Home Tech at the time, I had been on a podcast of 5,000. And so I had 5,000 potential tech guys. I knew if I started another tech podcast, I could probably pull some of them over. If I had started it on something else, chances are I probably wouldn't have. Going back to my point before, I started another tech podcast off of the one I have. It's only doing a quarter of what the original one did. That doesn't guarantee anything either. It all goes back to thinking about it in hustle, you know, from that standpoint. of getting out there and figuring out how to find your audience. And I still think the key, we get too hung up in numbers and not in quality. And not quality of the podcast, but quality of the relationships. And I think it's super important that you find your first 15 most avid listeners and you pour 80% of your time into them. I think that pays off in numbers. And when I mean pour time into them, talk to them, email them, call them, talk to them on Skype, get some things going, get them involved in the community, give them stake in the community, right? Let them be a part of let them mod your Facebook group, right? Those kinds of things. Give them buy-in. I think that matters. You want to grow your podcast? Start actually talking to people, really talking to people, not just talking to them through the podcast, but allowing them to talk to you. I'm always surprised, Dave, with my Gallup podcast, right? That's getting into thousands, right? It's super hyper niche, but we get 1,000 downloads every single week now for that podcast. When I talk to someone who's listened to the podcast, or they'll answer me a question in Facebook, and I'm like, hey, can I just call you?
Yeah.
Right? Can I just call you to get this in, not go back and forth on Facebook? Amazing engagement happens at that point. For the first time I'll call them or video, they're like, I can't believe I'm talking to you, right? This is amazing, right? To them, I'm just a guy on the microphone.
Yeah.
Call people directly, right? You want to grow your audience? Make one phone call, make one Skype call, make one Google Hangout with them. Talk with them for a few minutes one-on-one. Reach out to them, right? These groups are great, but you don't have to answer everything in the groups. Just say, hey, look, this is really complicated. Can I just talk to you? Oh, that changes the equation. All of a sudden, you're a real person.
Yeah. I've had a guy, his name's Corey. He's sent me 2 emails, and both required a really long response. And I just was like, hold on. And I picked up the bat phone and called him. And then he actually emailed me back and said, I think I have a business proposition for you. And so again, I was like, all right, now you got my attention. All right. And he was talking about doing a one-day seminar. And here's the interesting thing. People apparently, this would be, I got to do this sometime in the future, like have my audience describe what they think like my life is. Because he was under the assumption I was making, John Lee Dumas money with the School of Podcasting. And I'm like, no, and no. Because he wanted me to do a one-day seminar at Podcast Pittsburgh. And I'm like, I'm not even sure I'm going to that yet. I want to go, but I haven't officially determined it. I said, number one, usually people do things like that at Podcast Movement or at New Media Expo where there's already a ton of people going. I said, PodCamp Pittsburgh, he'd have to go Friday or, Monday. And I said, people got to go to work, and plus I'm not expecting thousands of people at PodCamp Pittsburgh. From what I've seen of these one-day events, they're getting around 100 people-ish, and I was just like, and he's like, well, yeah, but Cliff charges $1,000 for his one-day event. And I'm like, that's Cliff. I go, to me, okay, maybe, but, I said, just the whole picture that he thought my life was, and he was talking about John Lee Dumas. And I did the same thing. I said, look, number one, I'm a big fan of John Lee Dumas. I think the guy's got huge talent. He's a great entrepreneur, and he also had 6 figures in the bank when he started. That's a fact. Listen to Steve Stewart's interview with him. And I said, I don't have 6 figures in the bank. So if I just take off and run and it fails, I can't go, that's all right. Won't make my car payment this month or whatever. And so it was interesting hearing kind of what he thought I was doing. And I'm like, he's like, well, you're Dave Jackson. I'm like, yeah. And I explained to him that I actually like my day job most of the time. And so, I may quit in the future, but right now I'm it's paying the bills, and thank goodness, because my mouth is costing me a fortune, and I've got insurance, and because now I went back and I got to get a crown over here, and I got a cavity in the back. I swear I brush and floss, but apparently not enough. But I thought that was interesting.
We're getting old, Dave. That's the problem. We're just getting old.
But the thing that started off is I called him, and he's like, I can't believe you just called me back again.
No, right on. That is an incredible. I mean, I cannot overemphasize what it means to the listeners when you talk to them personally. They like getting emails back from you. They'll even like talking to you, on an IM. But man, if you take the time to just talk to them personally, it is incredible. And I've talked to some higher profile people than me, yet because they hear me on the podcast every week, when they get a chance to hear me on that, they're like, Because they listen to me in a one-way only mode, right? It's
Yeah.
me talking to them. All of a sudden, when they can ask me questions, that was it's just a great way of doing it. So I think if you can, if you make those, because karma matters. I mean, I'm a big fan of that. Karma matters. If you are giving back to people that way, it will come back to you. And so create an avid or a rabid. I like the word rabid better than avid, but create a rabid fan, and they will increase because they'll tell their friends and they'll tell other friends and they'll do stuff for you. That's how you grow your audience exponentially, is by getting other people to do it for you. The number one question we hear in the Facebook group all the time is, how do I use Facebook and Twitter? But you don't, right? No one grows their audience on Twitter, right? I mean, maybe.
Oh.
But it's reaching out to people. It's making that connection to them that grows your audience.
Yeah, it's the only people that grow their audience grow it artificially.
Well,
with
right.
Twitter.
Yeah, I guess that was I was trying to poke fun, and it didn't really go where I wanted it to go.
But it is.
People
It's
Twitter
the
bombing,
truth.
right? Yeah.
Ask yourself this question: when was the last time that you subscribed to a podcast that you discovered on Twitter?
Never.
Zero. Never.
I've never done that.
Facebook.
Yeah.
No. Sorry. The thing that's driving me nuts with Facebook is the whole autoplay video thing, and everybody's posting videos. Which I saw one thing that was cool. There's this new bicycle wheel that has a battery in it, and it makes your bike electric, and you can go longer. Other than that, all the videos have been just, pull my finger and, that kind of. Facebook is fun, but I've never discovered a podcast on Facebook. If I'm looking for a podcast, this is how I discover a podcast. Either A, go to Google and I type in blah, blah, blah subject, podcast. And then, go from there. Or I go into iTunes and I go blah, blah, blah podcast, enter. And then I click around. And then from there, I look to see, what does it sound like? When was the last episode? And even if it's pod faded, I'll still listen. It might be good, depending on if it's evergreen content. But that's how I find podcasts. And here's the interesting thing. I'm finding myself starting to unsubscribe from podcasts because I'm getting the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's weird. Like, Jay Moore, I love Jay Moore. I think he's funny. He's a good comedian. He's interviewing kind of the same old people, which at first was cool because it was Jay and he's kind of a funny guy, but his show hasn't changed at all. So on one hand, the thing that got me in 2 years later is kind of like, it's the same old. So I don't know.
We grow, right?
Yeah.
We grow and we change, and things change, and you need to change, right? It's one of those kinds of things. You made a comment a couple shows ago about just because it had to do with live audio.
Yeah, just because it's a real person doesn't mean it's really interesting.
Yeah, and just because you're a real host, it doesn't mean you're really interesting either, right? This is the backside of everybody podcasting. Is not everybody's good at it. And so, it's one of those kinds of things. I was listening to a newer podcaster this week, and just really struggling to get through the opening credits and those pieces, and a lot of there was a lot of behind the scenes inside baseball that was left in the podcast. Like, we don't need to know that some of that stuff. We don't want to know, especially if it's a solo cast where you've got post-production time. Cut some of that. So we don't need to know what's going on behind the scenes. Cut some of that stuff out. It just because it's real, like you said, doesn't mean it's really interesting. And so not all real stuff should be left in. So, from that stuff, it's not necessarily just because you want to do it doesn't mean you're really good at it. And so some of us really need to work at it. I do this all the time. You said to me the little phrases that we have, right? We were talking about, and the one you say is, well, what do you say all the time when you're...
There you go.
Well, there you go. What I found, so you asked me, like, so what do you do? And I was like, what do I do? So I've been listening to myself for that. I stop myself in mid-sentence and start another one without finishing the sentence that I'd started, right? I'll be in the middle of a conversation. I'll just a sentence. I'll just cut it off and start with the next one. And I'm like, wow, I had a thought there, Jim. Slow down and finish your sentence, right? You got to get better at it. This is a skill and a talent, but it's mostly a skill. And I think people have to work on their presence and their cadence and all those things necessary to make this successful.
One of the things that I've been doing, and I need to do more of, is I will listen to my show 3 or 4 days after I put it out. And so I'm listening to last week's show, which was this crazy, wacky show that I haven't done in a while. And the whole idea was there are so many different ways you can can produce a podcast. So I had the sportscaster guy and this and that. And I made this whole little skit about this thing called the Stylizer 3000 that you plugged in. And I listened to it back and I go, I never tied that skit into the topic. It's just, here's Dave. And all of a sudden he's talking in weird voices. And I'm like, what the heck? You know, it's like, I should have, I at the end of that. And I had some guy, I was worried about it because I'm like, if this is the first time these people tune in, they're going to go, what the heck am I listening to? And I had some guy said, hey, you lost me at the monster truck rally. Because that was like 3 minutes long. And it had me laughing, so I left it in. But the whole time I was like, this is, you know, I've gone out there. This is way out there. And then I didn't tie it into, oh, by the way, you know, you can do things in a character and this. But I'm like, that was just kind of like Dave being weird for 3 minutes at the beginning of his show. And I'm like,
or super sarcastic, right?
Yeah, or
I mean,
super sarcastic.
it was super sarcastic at moments of kind of picking fun of the various hosts that are out there.
Yeah. Well, I think my favorite line was where Darth Vader said, I need a mint. I was like, that was, every time I heard that made me laugh. I'm like, all right, that's staying in there. So, but it was one of those where it's like, I didn't do a very good job of setting that up or explaining what the heck you just listened to, or why did I do that besides it's fun to waste 4 hours making a 4-minute clip.
Super creative though. It was super creative. I mean, I loved it. That's one of those things that just makes you laugh, right? I laughed my whole way. I was listening to that on the way in and I laughed my way. It was a Monday morning all the way into work, you know, so good work.
The funny thing is it probably took, I forget how many hours. It was 3 or 4 or 2. It was a lot. And I swear once it was done, I spent another, like, I don't know, 15 minutes listening to it over and over and analyzing it to death. I was like, so, Patrick said I also almost peed with the mint comment. Okay. Well, that's the one that made me laugh every time. So,
Chris had asked me to talk a little bit about, and I always get the name of this thing wrong. So let me make sure, let me go back up to his comment here and find that, but, Voicemeeter. And let's save that for next week's show. So I'll bring that back a little bit and talk about the benefits of Voicemeter, because we talked about it a couple weeks ago. He says it's underrepresented and it's a really great tool. And I can't disagree with him. I think no matter what you're doing, you can use Voicemeter in certain circumstances to get your own virtual mix minus, which is pretty cool. So
you have to see, is that anything you could do like a screen share of?
Yeah.
I know it's an audio podcast, but maybe that's something we could.
It's super simple. Super simple. So maybe we could bring that in. Maybe we'll remote out to my broadcast server on Azure. And I was also listening to last week's show. The other thing I need to do is do a setup where we talk about how to set up your WordPress site on Azure and how cheap it is and how affordable and how easy it is. Maybe walk through that during the show.
Yeah, because you do talk about that, and I'm always like trying to picture it in my head, and I'm like,
it's the best. I think it's Microsoft's best kept secret. They have a lot of great stuff in Azure. WordPress on Azure is just dynamite, and the thing is it's just a couple clicks and you're in, and then it's a WordPress instance. And if your podcast got popular, and you needed more traffic, you can just up your server and buy a little bit more each month. I think. I may be up to a couple bucks a month for my server, that on Azure. So if you go to validatemyfeed.com or if you go out to my new site, knowitguy.com, either one of those are running on Azure right now. And they're in the shared hosting free setup. It just works. So anyways, maybe we'll talk about that more.
You're now the Know It Guy?
I bought knowitguy.com. Yeah, because I have these Know It guides. So GUIDE, we call them Know It guides. And I set one up for Windows 10. I've set one up for the Amazon Echo. It's just a conglomerate of stuff I found that is helpful to people, and I throw it in these Know It guides. And it was designed for me so I could keep all my stuff in one place. And I thought, well, if I'm going to keep all my helpful links and stuff in one place, I might as well share them. So we created these Know It guides. You can check that out. KNOW-IT. That's on purpose, right? Big IT, because I want it to be it and IT, because these are IT solutions. knowitguy.com. Check that out. That's running on Azure, by the way, so you can check that out speed-wise as well.
Awesome. And speaking of awesome, if you go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, you can be one of our awesome supporters. And thanks to everybody for that. And if you go to theschoolofpodcasting.com, use the coupon code ASK20 to save off of your first month and every month after that, for the record. And we'll be here next week, bugless. I'm going to be troubleshooting this a lot this week to figure out what's going on. And we're here every Saturday, askthepodcastcoach.com/live. Thanks, everybody. I hate the fact that the TV shuts itself off.
Ah,
because I have to. I'm
I
trying to
know.
see it because
that's frustrating.
we're still on Spreaker right now. So hello Spreaker and Blog Talk Radio. Because the good news is, come on, seriously, what the heck? HDMI, yes, look at that. There we go. And now I can end the episode.
So this week on Thursday, I start my kind of takeoff for my podcast about an hour ahead of time and go out and start the server and get that all set up and make the connections to get Spreaker running, get Mixler all set up and running, all that stuff you got to do, embed the YouTube link in your webpage and all that stuff. And so it was about 30 minutes till, and I was super tired that week. I had not really I hadn't slept enough. And so I'm like, that really tired feeling that you have, your eyes are just, it just kind of hurts behind your eyes, and you're just like, so I thought, well, I'm just gonna put my head back a little bit. I'm just gonna put my head back and close my eyes. The next thing I know is my guest host going, Jim, hey Jim, and I had totally fallen asleep.
Nice.
Right here on camera, just head back, snoozing away, and took me about a full 5 minutes to get like awake again and like, oh man, we got to do a podcast here. So I've never had that happen before.
You ready for some good post-show stuff?
Yeah.
I had a conversation this week with a self-professed Twitter bomber.
Oh.
And I'm like, who's teaching you how to do this? And he said, well, I'm self-taught. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I go, well, no judging here. I'm just trying to understand, why are you doing this? And I have to make sure I say, because I don't want to out the guy or girl. Well, right. Let's do that right. And in a nutshell, he's in an industry where there's a lot of, in some cases, not great information. So he's trying to get experts on his show to get the right information out. And I said, can I please point out the irony here that the way you're getting people to talk and give the right information is to give out poor information? And he was like, point well taken. And I was like, because he's like, I'm not sending it to sponsors. I'm just trying. I need experts to come on the show. And this is my way of saying, look. And I'm like, yeah, but in the end, you're lying to the people that are, I didn't really want to dig it too deep, but I thought it was interesting. He was using it to get guests. And I was like, yeah, but here again, no matter how you slice it, somebody's going to get disappointed, whether it's the guest or the sponsor, that I expected more feedback. I expected something,
right? Because
I thought you had 10,000 listeners and you have, 400. So I just thought that was interesting because I had kind of determined what was going on and was like, all right, let's just go over and have a conversation. But
it's tough. Hey, let's do a segment on the post show called "Have you ever heard of this place before?"
Okay.
So I'm going to throw a link in the chat called Star Worldwide Networks. StarWorldwideNetworks.com. I threw that in the chat room.
Yes, and my answer is never heard of it.
Never heard of them before. So a buddy of mine who has been trying to podcast for ever, couldn't get going. He didn't want to do anything. And apparently Star Worldwide Networks does everything for you. You sign up and you basically record your podcast. He's doing an interview style podcast, and it looks like there's a bunch of shows out there.
Tons.
Let's see if I can find a price here.
I was going to say, because I know there was one, Something America, and it was literally hundreds of dollars per episode. And when one of the people that were on that show, plus they owned your feed and your content, the only thing she was allowed to bring with her was her intro music because she had paid for it. And here we go, host a show. And I did check out Shout Engine.
I like this guy. I mean, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned Shout Engine in the last episode.
Week.
I have played with them before. When I went, I was like, I remember these guys.
I was disappointed in their pricing after I looked at it, because I just used their free plan, and I thought, I was a little disappointed. 10 gig isn't a lot. I mean, it's something,
right?
But it's not a lot. And the 60 gig plan for the $20 60 gig plan, 60 gig, it's not like it's that much more, right? For $20, I'd expect a terabyte, but. So they kind of limit you from that standpoint. If you went gigantic, you would absolutely have to move from them. So it's a great evangelism site, but I was a little disappointed with their bandwidth.
This drives me nuts. Contact Hall of Fame radio personality Dave Pratt personally for more info and pricing. No. How about you just put your pricing on the page, and I will save you, because
I'll have to ask Keith how much he pays for this thing.
advertise. I did contact Acast, which is a company. It's another one of these. Acast, the future of podcasting. Acast takes podcasting to the next level by connecting listeners, creators, and advertisers. One of these podcasts for free. And I contacted them. I said, can I try out your service? And they're like, yeah. And you have to sign up. You have to say how many listeners you have and this and that. And so I just used the School of Podcasting just to see if they would get back to me. They're like, oh, this is great. We'll move your show. And Gunther, or whatever the guy's name is, will contact you about changing your feed. And I went, whoa, time out. Nobody's switching a feed anywhere. And I said, just for the record, if I did, do you have a redirect? And so after many emails, they said, oh, yeah, we have a redirect. Of course, you can always leave. But I was like, can I move another show, like Building a Better Dave or something that's kind of on a hiatus, not quite as high priority? And they're like, sure, but they are behind. They're backlogged right now of adding new shows. But on the other front, I was talking about audiometric.io last week and the fact that they no longer have a sign up button anymore. You can log in if you're already there. And I sent them an email Thursday and yet to hear back. But I almost think what they're going to do, because they have a stitching program, like you can add your MP3 file and say, here's where I want the ad, here's where I want the ad, which would be great if that's what they're going to offer, because there are a lot of people that want to have advertising in their show, but they don't have the technology to do it. And there was, back in 2006, there was Gigavox, which got sold to Podango, which then went out of business. But so yeah, Acast is another player on the market that I was like, oh, interesting. So I'll have to keep you posted on that as we go along. But yeah, I've heard of, like I say, I know there are a couple places out there that'll charge you like $500-600 for a weekly show, and that's where you record it. And in some cases, they'll get on with Skype, like they'll call you on Skype and they'll call your guest. So they're the third party, and then they'll actually do the recording, and then from there, that's it. You're done. And they take it and edit it, and they'll edit out the ums and they'll do the show notes, everything. And depending on, if you're a small business owner, that's probably worth $500-600. But no, I'd never heard of. Do we have another one besides whatever it was?
No, that's just the one. What's it called? StarWorldWideNetworks.com.
Yeah, because the one I was looking at was like LA. Let me see if it's in my. Oh, I cleared my cookies today. It was something where it was more religion, kind of all religion shows, and it's kind of odd because there's a certain stereotype that religious people are not always the brightest people, and I see that because some of the technology really geared for Sermoncast and all these other kind of stuff, they're just really bad solutions where you get sucked into somebody owns your feed and you're paying way too much and you have cruddy stats, and I'm like, man, it stinks. But they're like, well, he's a God-fearing man, this must be a good service. And I'm like, no, you just got taken for a ride. It's kind of a bummer every time I stumble into something like that. But
well, just because you're a real host doesn't mean you're really interested.
Yeah, exactly. Legal Talk Network, Michigan Living. I think Gordon Firemark, I think, is doing podcast consulting, but he's really going after just lawyers. I think I saw something in his Google Plus group where he's kind of doing I don't know if it's a podcast about podcasting, but I think he's doing a show about podcasting in the legal field. I'll have to go over and see what he's doing. But I did see that he's another guy that's kind of like, and why shouldn't you? Everybody's, if you can get the money, why, by all means. That's what I was talking to one guy, and he's like, well, Cliff charges $1,000. I'm like, you know what? God bless him. If you can get it, take it. I'm like, but for me, I'm like, I guess if it was 8 hours and it was one-on-one, but that still seems.
Well, but Dave, you still think about the value to the consumer, right? Cliff's pricing is surely based on the amount of time he wants to spend talking to people. So, it's just like a very, very popular concrete pourer, right? When they get jobs they don't want to do, they're too small, it's in a bad neighborhood, right? There's no money in it. They'll just bid it so high that it's like, no, if I get the job, well then okay, it's good. But if I don't, that's the strategy, right? When you get to that point and the supply or the demand outstrips the supply, you can start charging those prices. And it's one of those kinds of things, well, you kind of go, well, that's what my time is worth. Take it or leave it, right? And people will pay for that. They really see Cliff as a value, and those kinds of things. So it's one of those kinds of things, I think, and we've talked about this before, the ascribed value. I think as a podcaster, you have to be careful. I get this question: how much do you charge to do a podcast? I get that question all the time, and I think we have to be careful about how we answer it. If we want the business so bad, we underbid it, we undervalue ourselves, and we get stuck in a trap, which means we're going to be spending time doing stuff that doesn't produce value for us, that where we could be promoting something where we could get a higher price. And so I think we have to be careful in that. That's
where I think I'm different than other people. When I do that, and I don't do a ton of it, I do it on an hourly basis. Like if it's I help Kathy Kelly with the Special Mouse podcast. And sometimes Kathy's shows are an hour and a half, and sometimes they're 40 minutes. And so if I give her one price, there's going to be some times when I could be really, and sometimes there's a lot of editing needed in that. She does a show for people with special needs, and she'll interview somebody with that. So you can imagine there are times when the dialogue there is a little zigzaggy, shall we say. And she'll say, can you cut this out? Can you cut this out? So I don't do the flat price thing, because if you do, you have to give them the ultimate, like, worst case scenario price.
Yeah.
And so I always charge, and then I just have a timer going, which is always funny because my wife will call. I'm like, I can't talk right now. I got a timer running. So
yeah, no, not right now. I'm on the book, right? From that standpoint. Yeah, I just think never cut yourself short, right? To just get the job. Don't overprice yourself. And this is the question, what's the right? I get again, what is the right pricing standpoint to be able to do those things? And I think it just matters on your skill and how much you want to use, but never undervalue yourself, right? Because you'll end up taking jobs that take you a long time to do, and then you get, it's really worse than being underpaid is worse than not being paid at all.
Yeah, that's why
not in every case. But
I'm almost out of the web design business. I haven't designed a website for anybody in a long time because, man, it was you have to do a lot of project management when this is what's going to happen in step 1 and step 2. Patrick asked, what about the podcastification guy? That is Kerry Green, who is also, he has classes on, I think, Audacity. I forget. He also does audio editing and such. I forget his website. Kerry, he's a nice guy. We've exchanged pleasantries. Podcasting. See how good his SEO is. Very good. KerryGreen.com/podcast. He's also Podcast Fast Track. There we go. So
Mike makes an interesting point. Mike Phillips. He says it gives his time away. It's a hobby for me. This is another strategy, by the way, one I've employed at the same time as well. Sometimes it's just better not to charge at all.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's an implied warranty when you start charging. And I get this with the PC hardware support that I get with my friends. I never charge them a dime. If they want help with their PC, bring it over. Sometimes it's going to take me a day. Sometimes it's going to take me a month. I'm doing it for free. You're just going to have to deal with it, right? If you don't like it, take it back. Just have it, right? But as soon as you start charging for it, this is what happened when I did charge. I mean, I used to charge, $25 to do this or $50 to replace your hard drive or whatever. Every little problem, every little hiccup from there on out, they're calling you back. Oh, it's got to be related to that. No, it's really not. It's because you're surfing porn. And then it's like, no.
Isn't that fun to say?
Yeah. No, it's not me.
It wasn't me.
It's definitely not me.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
And so to Mike's point, Mike Phillips, great point. Sometimes just give it away, right? And that is, I mean, I do a lot of that, giving it away. Dave, it's with you. It's my relationship with you in this show, right? I'm giving you my time for it. And you asked me, hey, how do you want to handle this? And I'm like, oh, no, it's all on you, right? This is any money we make is because if at some point in time I want to leave, I want to leave guilt-free. It's just like, Dave, I can't do this anymore. Now, I don't plan to do that at all, by the way. I love this show.
Well, we had somebody ask in a Facebook group, when do you know when to fire a client? And that's weird. And I said, there's the old, I don't know who said it. It might have been Larry Flynn or somebody that I can't tell you what porn is, but I know it when I see it. And I said, it's the same thing. I can't tell you what is a bad client. I just know, I know it when I hear one. And my favorite is I had a person that hired me and then explained what they wanted to do, wanted my opinion. I gave them. and it was like really like they wanted to launch like 3 podcasts at once. I'm like, let's do one and start from there, and let's do this, and you don't need this, and you don't need that. And they literally did the exact opposite of what I said. And so we had another consulting call, and I was like, all right, well, you did that. Okay, well, this and that. And it just became very, very frustrating for me to like, okay, well, if you're not that everything I say is gold, but, I was like, well, why'd you do that? And they'd be like, well, I read this on this website or what. I'm like, well, if you're going to get your, advice from a Google page from 4 years ago, what are you paying me for? And it was just finally, I was like, and so what I did is I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is the next step. You're going to do this, and that. And so they'd come back. They're like, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'm like, okay, but did you do step 1 yet? Well, no, but I saw this and I think this would be cool. Okay, but did you do step 1 yet? And I'm like, when you're ready to do step 1, give me a call. But in the meantime, you're just, wasting your time. And sure enough, shortly thereafter, they just fizzled out because they were all over the place. I'm like, well, no, I'm telling you, here's the plan. Here's what you do. And they just, so that was one where I was like, well, it's time to fire this person, because my wife told me, she's like, you need to fire that client. I'm like, why? She goes, because every time you deal with that person, you come home frustrated and upset. I'm like, well, they're just not, I want to help. That's the other thing. I want to help so much, and just follow what I'm doing. And it was like, no, not happening. So what are you going to do?
I've had to fire followers, and I had somebody on Twitter who, I've mentioned this before, kept calling me on all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, why are you even after about 6 or 7 times, I'm like, nope, not going to change it. No, sorry, no, I'm like, maybe you should just stop following me. And he was like, yeah, maybe I should. And that was just like freeing, because I'm like, okay, now I know that I'm not going to have to worry about this guy. So sometimes you just got to let your listeners go too.
And if you wonder why the audio doesn't sound that good this week, it's because Dave never pressed record on his recorder.
Uh-oh.
That's always fun.
See, that external recorder?
Yeah, and that's so good if you don't press record. Yeah.
I'm super skeptical of those things.
I was too freaking out about the phone.
You were troubleshooting that hard.
Yeah.
You were troubleshooting.
And what gets me, this is the thing that drives me nuts. About 6 minutes before we went live, I had a voice in my head that said, you better press record now or you're going to forget. And I was like, no, I won't forget. And then, I looked down.
I always over-record, just in case, right? I push start on Spreaker and Mixler and everything else 5 minutes early. We even go live on YouTube 5 minutes early, because I don't want because I've done that, right? You get all of a sudden something goes wrong and you get sidetracked by that, and then you forget to do what you should have done. So in my pre-flight, everything, I'd rather have too much than not enough.
Well, and the problem is that lights blink even when you're not recording. So, which is cool because you can see your volume level and things like that. But it's really easy to look up and think that it's recording, and then you go, oh, you know what? The little red light next to the record button is black. It's like, oops. So not the same. And that's why I always tell people you should be recording in 2 things. Right. Like we're recording in Google Hangouts and recording the portable recorder. If this was Skype, I'd have, call burner going in the background as well as this. I always have 2 because it's really easy to forget to press record.
On today's show, I want you to normally we just hang up at the end, right? And let's do you and me a little post no audience show.
Yeah.
And I want you to listen to the different sound when you hit stop record than when we are recording. And we'll talk and then we'll cut. We'll bail. I know you've got an appointment at
I'm gonna say we should probably bail now then. Yeah, so thank you, chat room and people, and my apologies for the extremely boring first 10 minutes of the show. I will definitely troubleshoot this. I'm going to let Blog Talk Radio people know too. I'm going to see what this is, but that's the problem. I don't have a whole lot of time to troubleshoot. So, but thanks everybody. And we will see you next week. Right? Yes. Awesome. Let me hit stop.